everyone. And yes, we are back with another episode of the Ultimate Human Experience podcast. You already know who it is. It is your girl, Brigitta, aka Righteous Sun. And on today's episode, we are talking all about trauma-informed wellness. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And yes, share with family and friends and those who you feel will vibe with this message. With that being said, let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited. We have like a full panel of amazing practitioners, ones who have been on before, but also new ones that I get to connect with, and they get to share their offerings and their gifts and how they help the world, really, at the end of the day. And so before we begin, of course, we have to introduce them because, like, how else can we do this? We have to start by giving them the spotlight so that they can share their gifts and what they share to others, as well as through the Hira Collective. So thank you and welcome. First, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out to come on and to share your wisdom and insight. I'm going to start with Brigitta. Please tell us what it is that you do and how you share your gifts and your offerings.
Absolutely. So I'm a midwife of the soul and quantum healer of brains, pains, and traumas. I am a retired paramedic and retired naturopathic doctor and have moved into trauma work. So facilitating psilocybin assisted journeys as well. Deep trauma work and transformation is my line of work, and also quantum healing, both in person and virtually, as well through craniosacral work and somato-emotional release. So trauma is my jam, as I like to say.
Thank you. And Megan.
Hi, everybody. So thrilled to be here. I am a certified aromatherapist, and I assist clients in kind of the side parts of trauma where it's, affecting your sleep and that with aromatherapy. I'm also a Reiki master, so I heal that way. And I also, I've been reading tarot since I was 13, so I also use the cards to help people as much as I can as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Jothi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am also a certified wellness coach, and I specialize in integrative somatic trauma therapy, as well as intuitive guidance, creative process. I do quantum healing and neuro-linguistic programming, as well as sound healing. So a little bit of everything mixed into a unique blend of guidance. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share myself as well. My name is Rashida. I'm a Reiki master. Have been teaching Reiki now for over 10 years. My love is being a psychic and a medium. I love to help people connect with past loved ones. It's just one thing that really speaks to my heart. And I'm just happy to have everybody here. Thank you all for sharing. So, of course, today's topic is all about collective trauma and how we can really inform people, especially now in the modern times. I know for myself, if we're talking about those that came before us, especially like, 'cause I have kids and we always talk about the different generations, right? And so my mom came from this generation that's called the silent generation, which is obviously like very fitting that they would call it that, but it was that they would go through certain traumas and continue moving on without speaking about it. And I'm now in a time, especially with my kids, where we share everything and there's nothing that's not on that table to be shared. And so when we are talking about trauma, which is not something that those before us would even speak about, and even up till now are a little uncomfortable about bringing up certain things because, of course, it causes triggers in them that they have suppressed or felt like they were strong enough to move past that. We're realizing now that it clearly does affect not just them, but the generations that come after them, right? Especially as women, we carry our eggs, we birth that. And even if I didn't experience the same trauma as my mom, I'm still carrying some of those burdens and traumas, and it comes out in different ways and different experiences and relationships, which I might not be able to, and many people out there might not be able to pinpoint and understand where it comes from. But when we have open discussions and we are starting to feel more comfortable about sharing those things, I really feel like it helps the next generation going forward. So I would love to hear your insight from your own personal experiences, but as well, of course, as practitioners. And feel free to jump in at any given moment. Anyone.
I'm happy to jump in and share my experience, both personal and professionally, but definitely personal. So, and I've shared this publicly as well on my social media page about my journey with psilocybin and my endometriosis journey. So I was a, paramedic, and of course, none of us are diagnosed with endometriosis when, we have pain. It's like, well, my mom had pain, so I have pain, so it's just normal. And that's what you grow up knowing and believing to be the norm. And most don't get diagnosed till they're trying to conceive or some sort of version of that, into their late 20s, early 30s, or even 40s, right? And as a paramedic, I just did the things to get through and survive. And, Advil, Tylenol, just, and you dread that time of the month every single time. And then I went back to naturopathic school and I embraced all the naturopathic things. Like we had a student clinic and I was there every single week, like doing acupuncture, botanicals, tinctures, like hydrotherapy. I was already eating clean and moving my body and doing all the things. And then I went and sought out even more practitioners and taking care of my mental health as best as I could. And yet here I was still struggling with this pain. And I felt like a fraud. There was part of me that's like, here I am, doing all the natural things, doing everything, and I'm still like experiencing this pain. What could be going on? And I actually had a friend a couple years ago, about 2.5 years ago, was like, would you consider doing psychedelics? And I was like, I don't think I'm carrying any trauma from being a medic. Like I was very good at taking care of my health, having providers, managing it as things went on. And I had a eat your words kind of moment when we went on our journey, and what was shown to me was the trauma that I was carrying in my vessel, in my womb space. It was not just mine, but it had come from my mother. So I knew that I was not consciously wanted. Like I was a whoopsie. Most kids in Eastern Europe are whoopsies. And, when you look at the timelines of marriage, my birth, all the things, it's like it just lined up too. And at some point along the way, I know my mom shared with us that she never wanted children. And during my journey, what I saw was a vision of my mom in my grandmother's kitchen and her about 4 years old being told that she was never wanted. And so when Rashida, you speak to, as women, we carry our eggs and we have all those eggs. It was even going back to my grandmother not wanting my mom, me not being wanted, right? And this womb trauma that we're carrying. So generational trauma, absolutely, like very logically and physiologically, we understand that connection. But even energetically and epigenetic wise, right, we carry that energetic trauma within our space. And needless to say, I had a very deep grief, like, processing just all the snot, all the goobers, all the things as you do when you realize this. And you're like, and I wasn't just processing my grief, it was obviously my mom's grief too, and probably even my grandmother's and great, like, who knows how far back this goes. And that night, I started my bleed early. And I was dreading it because I was like, oh my goodness, like it's going to be so painful and so awful. And I had no pain. I was like, okay, hold on. Like maybe the next day, right? Like it'll, and this was me like every single month just absolutely dreading it. And the next day there was no pain. I was like, maybe the next day. And then once again, there was no pain. And I was like, okay, it was like early. Maybe it's just a cycle, like next cycle, we'll see what happens. And so next cycle comes along and there was no pain. And I haven't really had pain since. And to me, that was just absolutely mind blowing when I made the connection of that generational trauma to, my pain that I was carrying in my body since the onset of my menstrual cycle, right? And I share this and I always tell people like, this isn't a cure all for everybody and there might be other things related to it. But for me, it gave me the access to understand what that trauma was that I was carrying in my body. And so that's why I became very passionate about this work too, because sometimes we know, but sometimes those generations won't talk about it, like you said, because they're the silent generation, right? So we can't really pull it out of them if we don't actually know what's going on, right? So for me, generational trauma is absolutely carried in the body. And, I've experienced it and I see it with my journeyers and my craniosacral clients as well. It comes up.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll share. Thank you, Brigitta. It really brings up a lot in terms of my own my own experiences with trauma as a child
Mm.
and the ways in which I grew up in my family, and a lot of that silent generation continuing to project the pain on us in this generation, and then having my own children. I have two. The birth of my daughter somehow birthed an opening for me and started a process for me around this healing of this trauma, this childhood trauma. And interestingly enough, I began to sort of do things differently as a parent because I knew that I couldn't continue the same cycles of parenting. I had to do things differently. I had to start to look at how I'm parenting, and I could sometimes hear my mom's voice or feel my mom's energy, but I would definitely intentionally make an effort, a concerted effort to do things differently, to put language to the pain, to create safe space for the kids to be able to unfold and express fully what was coming up for them. And in that, ironically, my daughter ended up having very similar experiences outside the home that I had as a child in the home. And that took me on a really big spiral because I'm like, what is going on here? I did everything in my power to protect this child and to protect her in a way where I created the safe haven at home for her to be in her full expression. But I couldn't protect her from the world. So what happened to me as a child happened almost exactly to her outside the home. And so I started to realize that this runs a lot deeper than just me. I started to really think about the blood memory, the trauma through generations in our lineage, and the women that have come before me, and how the harms that they have experienced that I know of. That's like maybe even just a smidgen of what I know to be true. There's probably so much more, um, has played itself out again in my daughter's generation. So I had to get through a lot of guilt and a pain around that, and feeling like I had somehow put her in harm's way and did something wrong, and really had to really come to a place of compassion for myself and give myself grace. But then also looking at the wider perspective, the wider picture of where how trauma continues to manifest generation after generation. And the fact that I am doing things differently in terms of holding space for my daughter as she experiences these things in the world, she has a safe home to come and like unravel, and we are very open. Sometimes I feel like I know she tells me everything without filters, and I'm like, do I want to know this? But it's such a blessing because I get to walk beside her and support her along the way. And that has lent itself to my practice as well, in terms of knowing that what works for me in my trauma healing isn't necessarily going to work for her. So she's also teaching me in her own healing process that there's no one size fits all. To really be a space holder and to listen and to be intuitive about how folks are experiencing their trauma and how they want to heal, where they're being called. So it's a really interesting journey, and it's a call for patience, a lot of compassion, but a lot of like opening to see that there are different ways. It's nuanced. Everyone's very unique in their journey through healing and through trauma healing, and that we can coexist within that together and walk together and learn from each other in those ways. So it's been a really enriching experience, and probably the most difficult walk I've ever been on, but it's been really beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
I can share a little bit as well. I never actually considered myself growing up as, having experienced trauma. I just assumed everybody kind of had the same childhood, and we did the same things. And the one thing I didn't realize is that, there's people who had a worse childhood than I did, but I didn't realize that, going to school with a mustard sandwich, wasn't normal for people. And having grown up with, some fairly financial restrictions, I just kind of thought that's the way everybody was. And I didn't even, my sister is 6 years older than I am. And so I don't have a lot of memories of growing up. So she's kind of my memory. She's the one that kind of, I'll say something's come up and like, did we ever do this? And she'll have the memory for me. And I was working with aromatherapy, and I started with aromatherapy specifically because I have some health issues. I'm an asthmatic and I have, all these other issues. And I really wanted to find another way to deal with them. And I was working with aromatherapy, and I was getting these vivid flashbacks because of the scent memory that we all carry. And I couldn't place it. I didn't understand it at all. And one of them specifically was lavender. And we run into lavender all the time. But when you're smelling like actual pure lavender, it's different than the body products and all of that. And I couldn't understand why I was so sad every time I smelled lavender. I just had no concept of it. And after speaking with my sister for a while, she said, "Oh, our grandmother always had a lavender garden." And that was our grandmother's home. To me, was my safe space. It was the place where I felt the most protected, I guess. And the lavender was just like holding on to that memory of being comforted and safe. And I couldn't get past, I didn't understand it at all. And then my sister and I got into some conversations, and she's like, like most people had food on their table. Most people, had two parents, especially because growing up for me, I was the only person that had a divorced parents. And again, I didn't really understand it. It was just the way life was. So by using aromatherapy, I've learned that we can kind of connect into good and bad memories. And just the smell can take you back to some place where you're comfort and you're safe and you're loved again. That was, kind of the beginning of me thinking, okay, this is something that we can absolutely help people who have experienced worse traumas, but less trauma than what I've done, and it's something that people can use to help support them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone sharing their personal experiences. I resonated with all of them, and I know the listeners will feel the same way. And this brings me to another question, because as I'm always listening to these conversations, Spirit always comes through and says, okay, let's add this question on. When we talk about, especially with everybody's experiences and going through that trauma, and we're talking about generational trauma and the things that are experienced over time, we have those that come before us that found a way, right? Because they didn't have the same resources. Like now it's open and out there, and we are encouraging people to speak about their trauma, although it does causes triggers, of course, which is very difficult for people to bring back up. We also say that that's re-traumatizing the body, but it's also something that is needed because we need to find ways to release that. When we think about those that came before us, and I can just use myself as an example. I remember talking to my mom, and we're just talking about like personal experiences, and her message was, or her response was, "Well, I'm fine. Like I turned out okay, I'm fine." And I'm like, so she's like, "So your sister's fine?" And I'm like, "Is she fine though?" Like the fact that you feel that you got through all of that heavy trauma, and that she also had to experience almost the exact same thing. And because for you, you say, well, I'm okay. So then if I'm okay, then she should be okay. Then everybody should be okay. And on my head, I was like, nobody is okay. Clearly, I can't get through to her on that. How do you explain to, and anybody can share on this one, but even like Jothi, like I'm a mom as well. And so I resonated a lot with what you were saying. I have 3 girls. My son is the oldest, but I have 3 girls. And so clearly God was here to teach me more. I needed to learn more because my mom had 3 girls and a boy, and the women don't like each other. I'm that middle person that's there that tries to keep the peace. And then I realized, well, I can't do that. But what I can do is help the three girls that I have in my house so that they can connect. And as they get older, they will find that bond that we don't have. What I am finding is that to explain to those that come before, because you have that hope that like, well, maybe they can change, or maybe, and it's not to say that they can't, because we've seen it, but it takes a lot for them to even open up those wounds again, to take off that band-aid. It's almost impossible for them. So how do you find yourself helping yourself and helping your loved ones around you to see that healing that trauma is important? And even if it's not something that they are willing or ready to do, even just a one little baby step, is something where you see progress in some way.
Oh, Rashida, it's so important. I'm sandwiched between my mom and my daughter quite often with the reminders of how trauma looks and shows up differently for everybody. And I think for me, on a personal level, as a daughter and as a mother, navigating these energies, it's really important for me to, one, remember who I am in it and what my journey is. And my journey is not going to necessarily look the same as someone else's journey. So really detaching sort of this expectation that my healing is attached to my mom's healing is attached to my daughter's healing. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Everyone is at their own pace and in their own way. And sometimes, like our older generations, there's a lot of armor there, right? There's a lot of protection. There's a lot of denial. Big time for my mom. She also says that everything was great. She thinks we had a really great, she thinks, one, we have a great relationship, and she thinks we had a great childhood. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So, perception, it's really interesting how, even my sister and I have very different perceptions, and she's 7 years old, younger than me. So I have a lot more memory than she does. So it's very interesting how you can watch the same movie and have a very different experience, right? So understanding that everyone's perception, they're wearing their own filtered glasses with it, they're on their own journey with it. So making sure that there's no codependency happening here. My healing journey is going at my unique pace in my unique way, my daughter's in hers and my mother's in hers. So when I can separate those journeys, there's then room for compassion and grace, right? And to see them from this lens, see my mom from a lens that she may never understand or completely heal or even begin to see the impacts of what we experienced as children and even what she's experienced as a woman, right? That may never happen. And I have to love her anyways. And the other part of that is I can model in my interaction and communication with her the gentle, loving, compassionate care that I didn't get as a child. I can model that for her as I reparent myself, right? And show that to my daughter. So there's a lot of navigating and dancing, and it's messy at best sometimes. And there's times where I get pulled right in, and we're at it, and it's like, oh my gosh, why is this happening again? Like, what is going on? I thought we moved past this. So it can be messy. So again, allowing for that messiness to show up and being okay with that and being and self, forgiving self, because I know I'm going to get called in sometimes and pulled in sometimes, both ways, with my daughter and my mom. So just navigating that and understanding my position in it and my truth in it, and then using my tools the best I can to care for myself in all of it.
Thank you.
Jothi, that was so beautifully explained and so eloquently described. Yeah, I think the compassion piece is a big one, right? And you spoke to also the piece about everyone's journey being on a different time frame timeline. And, I don't have kids yet. And so for me, it's a very different experience having parents, and the compassion piece is definitely a big one. But I think it's also letting go, like you said, of the expectation that they're even gonna maybe even like acknowledge it or look at it, and maybe definitely not even like address it in this lifetime. we can hope and dream that they do, because the weight of carrying that, it was actually brilliant. I was reading this book on trauma, as we do, and the author, he was talking about, it actually takes 3 times more energy to carry this trauma, to carry it, suppress it, and not actually, process it and move through it, than it does to just work through it. So the fatigue, when we talk about that generational fatigue of, going through these experiences and then constantly carrying it as well. And then, of course, we can easily get pulled into those moments because they're so exhausted and we're trying to show up with compassion. It's like this messiness that happens. And then this is where I think I'm really big on boundaries. I always joke around, I'm like, boundaries by Brigitta. It is, and it's not always, this wall with barbed wire and all those things, but it's sometimes these gentle boundaries, and it's those boundaries we probably weren't ever shown as kids. Like, I know myself, it was a lot of people pleasing because that's what I saw from my parents, right? And not ever saying no. And part of reparenting is actually being like, no, we have to have boundaries. Like, they're necessary, right? And so sometimes, like, what are those boundaries with our parents when they don't have any either? When we've done this amount of work, it's like, what is that give and take of compassion, but not letting, I don't even know if derail is the right word, but yeah, sometimes it's like you can see the freight train derailing and you're like, we're going down this path yet again. It's like, reel it in. And sometimes you set those boundaries because you have that, and you try to remain in that higher perspective, and not from, I'm better than you, but just that grounded presence, because trauma is so dysregulating for the nervous system, right? So then really it comes back to our tools, like you were saying, Jothi, right? Of like, okay, how do I regulate my nervous system and stay grounded so I don't get sucked into this and then it becomes a spiral again? So I think that piece about boundaries is just something that, as you were speaking, the kindness and the compassion, absolutely, in reparenting, but I think the boundaries is also something that was dropping in for me as you were speaking. So just wanted to add that onto what you were saying.
Yes, thank you.
The other thing I was picking up on too was that, the older generations tend to, I'm fine. That term is I'm fine, right? You were saying that, Rashida. And I can think of, I was close with my great grandmother, and there was never anything wrong with her. And there was never anything wrong with my grandmother. And my mom's the same. And I feel like for us to do the work to heal the generational trauma is doing the work for them, because A, some of them are not around anymore, and B, they're just not ever going to realize that they need to heal themselves. They might realize it, but they just don't have the tools themselves to even decide that that's a step they need to take. And I feel like the more work that we can do on ourselves and with our children, it's going forward versus going into the past. We can only hope to change the future and, deal with the past.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Brigitte. I just wanted to add to that. There is an energetic healing that happens, I feel, in this current present body that I feel that runs deep in the past, that I feel that is definitely bolstering me in ways and strengthening me, and also liberating my ancestors in a way, because it's been something that's been held in our lineage for so long. So I think there is something to be said, even if folks realize it or not, there's something that is energetic about our healing practice that frees our ancestors, and that I feel very connected to their strength, and
Mm.
perhaps even their prayers for us to be here and to manifest what they couldn't do in their own lives, right? So yeah,
Mm.
just wanted to add that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jyoti, I think it goes back, they say at least 7 generations, right? 7 backwards and 7 forwards when we do the healing work.
love that. I think about my kids, the holidays came around and there was a little bit of a hiccup in between like families, and my kids were like, because it's not their trauma, right? And that was something that really stood out for me. And it also reminded me, as well as all of you are talking, is that the work that we continue to do, and it might not be something that is understood right now in this time with my loved ones. They get it, they don't get it, although it was things that were used before, right, by our ancestors, and it's coming back. And the way that I've had the opportunity to share that with my kids and to teach them is as if like the holidays came around and they're just like, why can't that just be something that we move past? Like, because it wasn't theirs. And that's something that they've always said is that, like, what you experience is what you experienced. Like, my experiences are different, mom. And I'm like, light bulb? Like, it was something that I needed to remind myself that everybody's, like what you said, Jyoti, everybody's experience is very different in terms of what they're going through and the energy as well, right? That energy that we carry as we are continuing to do the work, it eventually starts to, I guess you could say, fizzle out to the point where they aren't carrying those same heavy burdens and they are coming into this world a lot lighter. And I appreciate that they don't have to experience those same things. They don't have to feel that. Yes, it does show up in very interesting ways in their emotions, how they view the world, how they feel the world views them. I see a lot of those moments in them, but we're able to find ways to work through it now in these times. Do you find now, I guess, from like maybe in the last, like, I would say from like maybe the last 10 years, have you seen a shift when it comes to the work that you do when it comes to trauma and helping the people that you connect with? Do you find that there has been a big difference in terms of the ease and the transition of helping people? And has your practice even shifted even more? Because as we're always learning, you know, even as practitioners, we don't have it all. We are continuing to learn more and more about the body, about the mind, about the spirit. And have you found that your practice has shifted, and how have you accommodated that shift?
The one thing I have noticed in the last, probably especially since COVID, people are willing to do the work. They realize that there's more than just going to work every day and, picking up the kids from school. And they realize that there's something missing from them, whether it's spiritually or there's something that needs to be healed. I have definitely realized. And I mean, obviously, there's still people that are not willing to do the work. It's just not there. But the clients that come see me are ready to make a change. They're ready to do whatever I can give them. And if it's not like, if they're done with me, they're like, okay, what other practitioner can I see? What other things can I do? Because they're ready to take control back to their lives, like to be able to hold on to it and say, like, especially, with the craziness of the world these days where you can't control all the other garbage, something that you can control is just so beneficial. And I'm noticing more and more people are like, okay, I need to grab on and hold on and figure out what the heck is going on with myself in order to be able to deal with all the garbage that's in the world right now.
I agree, Megan. I think the pandemic really opened folks' eyes, right, to the systems, the societal way, like it just opened folks up and opened their eyes to something that didn't feel very good. And I don't know that it was just the pandemic. I think the pandemic was a real catalyst. I think things were already starting to shift, with when it came to like George Floyd and like racial tensions. And I think folks were starting to really see like, whoa, like the very people that are here to supposed to protect us are showing up. So I think folks started to see the world differently around them. And then because of that opening, there was a little bit more willingness to see things differently in terms of wellness and healing. So it was like, okay, so then there's this sort of Western philosophy around medicine and how we heal our bodies. But I want to see what else is out there. I want to see, something else. So the alternative modalities started to become a little bit more acceptable and it's becoming on, and I think social media, of course, when you talk about the digital age of information, there's a lot out there outside of your typical going to the doctor, right? So it's like, okay, what else is there? How else can I take care of myself? So that started to open people up even more. And I think for me in my practice, this embodied approach really became sort of like the last, like I really went deep into spiritual foundations and, creative foundations and intuitive foundation, but the body, like this physical vessel was a space I hadn't really explored and excavated fully. So when I got my training in integrative somatic trauma, I really started to realize that was like, whoa, my body's holding a lot of stuff and it's telling me all sorts of things that I haven't been listening to. And just really attuning to that. So I think folks are starting to understand better the nervous system, how trauma shows up in our response to stress, how we move through with these filtered glasses that inform our decisions through trauma and like all of these things. And so I think folks are becoming a little bit more aware and educated on these matters, hence the reason it's becoming more acceptable or more interesting and curious for folks to look into. And then that for me has been like it's been a personal space of exploration for me to go into my body. So as I do the work in my own soma and understand it better, it's informed my practice much more because it's something that's happening in tandem.
Brigitta?
Yeah, Jothi, you put it so well. I think it's a combination of things, right? As we deepen our practice as practitioners, I think people are also waking up. And what I saw in my practice and my journey, going from paramedic to naturopathic doctor to quantum healing, and really it was the very physical, just really protocol-based suppression of symptoms, really to that more of that holistic approach, but still really only finding the lip service of that energetic vessel and the somato-emotional trauma piece. And that was really missing, where it's like, yeah, we're dealing with a lot of the holistic things, but there's still a missing piece. And that's where my work with craniosacral really came in. And that really took to the energetic body and the trauma work and the deeper pieces. Yes, the physical pieces, but more so that energetic body. And that's where I was finding, initially I started with concussion work, and I was finding that's where I was seeing the biggest shifts is with the hands-on work. And because we're also releasing trauma from the nervous system. So yes, it's the physical structures, but it's the nervous system. And then that just kind of exponentially kept growing. And then now it becomes, generational trauma that I'll pick up in sessions or past life traumas or whatever it is, right? So, and people at first I was always like, how is this gonna look? Am I gonna, going from naturopath to like this woo-woo side, as people like to kind of look at it sometimes, they're like, has Brigitta gone off the deep end? Like, what does that look like? But the more I leaned into it and I was able to blend both the science and the soul, as I like to call it, right? People really leaned into it because it's not this random woo-woo stuff. There's actually so much knowledge around quantum biology and quantum physics and how it weaves in with the energetics that we know about and that we're experiencing. Is just often not taught hand in hand. And quantum physics really is that bridge between the two. So my practice has completely changed. I never thought I would be here, but I love it, right? Doing this kind of work. And then it's also the practitioners and the way I need to show up for my body, because that's really changed to sometimes the point where I know I'm purging things and my body's not even requiring supplements because I know it's energetic and it's somatic and it's generational trauma that I'm releasing or past life stuff or whatever it might be. So it has changed the way I view my body as a messenger, as you were saying, right? It talks to me all the time. So if we just listen, it's like, what does it actually need? And then that in turn allows me to have a different lens and perspective for my clients or my journeyers, right? Of like, what do they need? And it's not that we throw anything out. We just keep adding beautiful things to our toolbox, as you were all saying, right? Because we absolutely keep growing and learning. And that's the beauty of this journey of what we call, alternative medicine, but really is complementary, and it is the original medicine because it's the medicine of our ancestors. It's what we had before, the Rockefeller system of medicine came online. So we're going back to our roots and our ancestors and how we actually healed the whole body and the whole vessel with the land and with the medicines of the earth and the stars, right? And it's all of it. So
I appreciate that. I love how we are really talking about the connection to the body. I feel like it's now something that is coming, that is being talked about more, is reconnecting to the body and not just looking at it from the science perspective, because I think that's how they've always made it be, right? We're just looking at the body as an anatomy, almost like as if it's outside of ourselves. Everything has a body part, it's a body part, an organ, of this and that. But yet they play such important roles, not just on the science level, but on the spiritual level as well. And I think that that is something that we are starting to get more into. I know that, science itself doesn't want to connect the two, or they feel like it has to be material based beforehand. And yet, as practitioners, we know that sometimes certain things can't be explained. But what we do know is that it's something that is felt. For those who are slowly connecting back to their body, and Megan, like you said, sometimes people are experiencing trauma and don't even know because they think it's normal, right? And we talk about children. They are going to school and thinking that everybody's life is this way. I went to school knowing my life was very different, but was wondering if anybody else had the same life. And I realized, oh, nobody does this, then I don't want this life. But there's so many out there who, if you are around the same people, if you're in the same environment and you have the same people around you, are going to think that it's normal to live that way unless you are taken out of that environment in some way. And so then you take that into adulthood, and then you find that in your relationships, whether it's the breakdown of relationships or whether it's trying to keep a job or anything like that. And you realize that it could actually be just things within our body that we haven't released or we haven't even recognized as being trauma. Just like what you said, you didn't think that you experienced, Megan, any type of trauma, and yet it did affect you in some way, and it affected you as you got older. So my question then would be, is this importance of connecting to the body, how do you feel like that will change in the next few years? Because as we know in society right now, they are more and more trying to take that away from us, right? That body autonomy. They're trying to say it's not in your hands, it's in our hands. And yet we're trying our best to say no. We're learning more through social media, through reading and connecting with others, that no, the power is within ourselves and that we can slowly start to empower ourselves and then teach others to do the same. What are your thoughts in terms of just reconnecting to the body? And for those who perhaps don't even realize that they have experienced trauma or they minimize their trauma, I think that is the biggest piece. Is sometimes they minimize it to say it wasn't that bad, or I didn't experience as much as so and so, so I'm okay.
I think a couple of things come up. Sorry, Brigitta.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think a couple of things come up for me in terms of that connection. So I wrote down the body as the land, my body as the land, and as the stars. Understanding that I am no different than the tree in my backyard, and understanding the connection to the broader sense of what body means, body of water, the body of land, right? The body of the cosmos, the way the moon impacts my body, the way the stars impact my body, the way the environment is impacting my body, but also the way that my body impacts my environment and my presence impacts a relationship, right? So that relational piece of the way my body connects in itself, but also outside of itself to the land and to the stars, to the skies. So nurturing that connection is really important to understand where I sit in it and what that positionality feels like, and what the impact is, I think is really important. So how I impact a space and how the space impacts me. So there's that nurturing and being present with those connections. And then, oh my goodness, I lost the other point. Yeah, it'll come back to me. But I think that seeing my body in relation to the land and the cosmos is very important. And, oh, this is the other point, and the ancestors, right? Those that have come before me. And so the ancient wisdom ways of being and what that means. And it's very simple. It really is very simple. I think we've overcomplicated the ways in which we connect to each other and with ourselves. And so really tapping in to what that is, what that sense of ancient wisdom practice looks like, whether it's an altar, whether it's creating an apothecary, like whatever it is, herbs and medicines and tinctures, whatever it feels good to you and gives you a sense of some sort of connection to the past and what our lineages were doing already, and reclaiming that those ways. So there's the connection to the past, and then there's the connection to the present, the land, the stars, and our own body, all as one ecosystem.
Thank you.
That's so beautiful. And my brain went to the exact opposite and the disconnection and dissociation that people often experience with trauma, right? And so many people being on autopilot and not even being consciously aware that they are. And I think that's a big piece is a lot of our practices, right? And Meghan aromatherapy, this is a big one, is helping people come back with their physical senses too, of like how do we come back into the present because so many people are either living in the past or they're worried about the future or they're not even like they're just dissociated completely. And they're just running through this, like I get up in the morning, this is my routine, and there isn't even that conscious thought or reflection. And they don't even give themselves a moment to breathe or think. And once again, it's that separation from the body. Like I think when we talk about even just breath and how many people don't even realize, like, have I even taken a proper breath today? Or have I just been like, right, that's this whole day and just really up, like just really superficial, just trying to be like trying to just survive through the day. And so I often think of that dissociation and that disconnection that happens in trauma, right? Also as a safety mechanism because the nervous system is in that fight or flight response. So that is part of it is being in that fight or flight response or the total dorsal vagal of, fawn and dissociate. So those are the things that are coming to me. So it is those practices that then bring us back to the present, back to the body, back to nature, right? It really is a lot of those things that we already know that our ancestors knew, like, the sun, the water, the land. Go hug a tree, literally, just go hug a tree, right? Put your hands on in the snow and the grass. It's uncomfortable, but it'll ground you and bring you back to that present moment. And really, when we talk about nervous system support, it's a lot of those things, right? Even our ancestral foods, like what does that look like? That really nourishes and nurtures us and gives us that sense of safety and home, especially in the wintertime when we're thinking, most cultures have some sort of soul food, right? That we really come back to as this place of nurturing and we usually have those images of like my grandmother's kitchen or whatever it is or my mom's kitchen and just coming back to that moment and not being on our phones and actually being present with our food and the people around us, right? So I think I love that you connected it to the earth and the stars and the cosmos and all the things, but it's also how can we take a moment to be present. And maybe it's as simple as, when you have your cup of coffee in the morning, like just take a second to actually smell it, right? And it's like this mindful moment and meditation doesn't always have to look like I sit here like, I'm Buddha and I'm like in the mountains. Sometimes it's a walking meditation or it's a moving meditation or it's just be that moment of presence. Like how can we just come back to our body and one of our senses in this moment? And I think this is where Meghan, I think your work comes in beautifully, right? Because it
Yeah,
helps ground
I
that
do
in.
find it makes a huge difference with people just to, one of the things I say is, inhale from this personal inhaler. And the first question is, well, how long do I have to do it for?
Mm,
And I'm like, okay, so then I'm going to make it really difficult for you. I want you to inhale 10 times. And people just don't seem to like, they want it quick and easy and like, this is going to fix me instantly. And so the one thing I've like, especially with aromatherapy, is it has the ability to pull people into that parasympathetic state where it gets them into that ability to rest and digest and like heal versus always being in that fight or flight that you were talking about. And it also has the ability to do the complete opposite as well, because the scent and the scent memory is so intertwined that if I'm not careful and someone has had trauma in their life that either A, they don't know about, or B, they don't really, explain or understand where it came from, that can actually put them right back into that trauma. So it's kind of a fine line where you want the person or the client to be able to choose their own oils and almost treatment so that they're comfortable as well. But it really does, I convince people, or I try to at least take their inhalers as soon as they wake up in the morning and set an intention that whether it's as simple as today is going to be a good day. And then throughout the day, repeat that intention with the scent, so that eventually that when they smell that scent, their brain's just going to automatically go right to like, oh, today is a good day. And it's, the tricking of the brain a little bit. But the amount of clients that I have that will be, in crisis, say, well, did you use your oils? Oh no, I forgot about it, because they're just so, wound up, and so they can't even see forest, right? And that's that sitting with yourself and understanding and listening to your body and what your body needs in order to heal is probably, the most important step, is to be able to, be there for your body and your mind.
I just thought of something too with connection. I really feel like it's very relational. And the reason I say that is because I just heard this and it really blew me away, is that in Indigenous communities, when someone is not well, they sit in circle and look at the community and say, okay, what are we doing that this person is unwell? Like, how do we come together as a community to support this person, but also to support what we're doing? Because there's something within what we're doing that has been a part of creating this unwellness. It's not just solely on that person's back to hold and walk with alone, right? So I think that when it comes to trauma and healing, we don't do it alone. We can't do it alone. The trauma wasn't done alone, right? It was inflicted. There was something in our environment and in our relationships. So it's really important, even in my work and in my own healing, that it's relational, that it's done in relationship. And that could be in relationship with my partner and my children. It's in relationship to myself. How do I see me and navigate what's going on in my vessel and in my heart, but also what's happening energetically around me, right? And in relationships around me, in environments around me. So yeah, it was really interesting that I saw that relational piece to healing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This really makes me think, Jothi, exactly what you're saying, and every Brigitta and Meghan, the importance of relationship and the ecosystem. Because as we know, the earth, the trees, the grass, the water, the sun, everything works together, right? You can't have one without the other. And that's really what you all have expressed today, is that you need one whole. It needs to be a unit in order to be able to grow, in order to heal, right? If there is one thing that's missing out of the equation, imbalances things. We're seeing that right now in society with everything that's going on with nature and the climate. We're seeing that the imbalance is there. But we're also seeing that we are recognizing that and are trying to find ways to find that balance and to bring back what is missing. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I was always excited. I'm always excited when I do these episodes, but it honestly blows my mind every time. The wisdom, the insight, the knowledge, the way that everyone expressed their own personal experiences, as well as incorporated your gifts and your offerings. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And it really just tells that the Hira Collective, connecting, right? That's what it's about. It's relationship and connecting with other like-minded souls so that we can continue to grow and learn from one another and elevate. And every single time it expands my heart even more. The expansion continues, and I'm very grateful for all of you showing up today. Even though we had those technical difficulties, it was totally worth the wait. I just want to say thank you once again. You can connect with all of these beautiful practitioners, Brigitta, Meghan, as well as Jothi, through the Hira Collective. This is the Ultimate Human Experience Podcast. We are out. Peace.